From the very beginning, Amy and Tammy Slaton had been bound by something deeper than blood. They weren't just sisters who happened to grow up in the same house. They were battle-tested companions who had walked through fire together, held each other through the darkest nights, and celebrated each tiny victory like it was a miracle. Their bond was a lifeline in a world that often misunderstood them, mocked them, or judged them. They had been inseparable since childhood, united not only by their size and struggles but by a rare connection that made them more like soulmates than siblings. They had laughed until their stomachs hurt, cried until their bodies shook, and leaned on each other in every crisis that had come their way. But lately, something had shifted. What once seemed unbreakable had begun to crack, not with the force of an explosion, but slowly, almost invisibly, like ice spreading across a lake until one day it groans under the weight of the world and fractures. The wedge came in the form of Amy's husband, Brian. At first, he seemed like a gift, supportive, gentle, the kind of man who told Amy she deserved more than just survival. He whispered about stability, about creating a future for the kids, about finally stepping out of Tammy's shadow. He dressed his words in comfort, almost like lullabies. But Tammy could hear the sharpness beneath the soft tones long before Amy could. What Brian was talking about wasn't independence, it was separation. The moment it became real was so ordinary it could have gone unnoticed. Amy sat in the living room folding tiny shirts and socks, her hands busy but her mind heavy with the weight of life. Brian slid onto the couch beside her, his presence calm, his voice low. "Don't you think it's time we start living for ourselves, Amy?" he asked, his eyes steady on hers. "Me, you, and the children. Tammy's strong now. She doesn't need you like before. You've done your part, and she's capable of standing on her own. We can build something new, our own life, our own family." The word struck like an arrow, straight to the center of Amy's heart. Part of her wanted to agree. She thought of the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the times she had put Tammy first, even when her own children cried for attention. Maybe Brian was right. Maybe Tammy no longer needed her at every turn. But another part of her, the part shaped by decades of sisterhood, screamed that this wasn't just about creating a new life. It was about leaving a piece of her soul behind. And deep down, she knew Tammy could feel it too. Tammy didn't waste much time confronting her suspicions. One crisp autumn afternoon, the air cool and restless, the sisters sat together on the porch swing, the boards creaking beneath their weight. Tammy's voice cracked as she turned to Amy, desperation mixing with anger. "Don't you see what he's doing, Amy? He's not trying to help us. He's trying to split us up. He doesn't care about you the way I do. He's after what little we have, the money, the property. He's looking for control, not love." Amy's eyes brimmed with pain and confusion. She wanted to believe Tammy, but Brian's steady influence echoed in her mind like a song she couldn't silence. Shaking her head, she squeezed Tammy's hand. "No, Tammy. He wants what's best for us. He wants me to be a good mother. Maybe it's time I put the kids first. Maybe it's time I let you go." And just like that, the knife twisted. Tammy's heart broke, not because Amy wanted independence, but because she was blind to Brian's true intentions. For Tammy, family was sacred. No matter how hard things got, you didn't walk away. But Amy, under Brian's sway, was redefining family, choosing her husband and children, even if it meant closing the door on her sister. The days that followed felt colder, sharper, as if even the air carried a warning. Amy leaned into Brian's promises of a brighter tomorrow, and step by step she pulled away from Tammy. Conversations grew shorter, visits less frequent, laughter less common. It wasn't a wall the sisters built together, it was one Brian manipulated Amy into stacking, brick by brick. Tammy watched it happen, powerless, devastated, but still clinging to hope that one day her sister would wake up and see the truth. Because she knew, she had seen the look in Brian's eyes, the sly interest in money, the subtle questions about bank accounts and family property. Tammy feared that by the time Amy realized what was really happening, it would be too late. And the most terrifying thought of all was that their bond, the one thing that had always carried them through, might not survive the storm. Just when it seemed the sisters' story couldn't twist any deeper, the headline struck like a lightning bolt. 1,000 Del B sisters star Amy Slaton arrested for drug possession. The words blazed across social media, fans shocked and horrified. It didn't feel real. For years, Amy had been the goofy, loving, often struggling sister, but never the kind of person you'd imagine caught up in drugs. Yet according to reports, she had been stopped late one night outside Dixon, Kentucky, and officers claimed they found small traces of illicit substances in her car. The news spread like wildfire, fueling gossip, memes, outrage, and speculation. For Amy, The arrest was shattering. It wasn't violent, it wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to send her world crashing down. In the days that followed, whispers of interventions began. TLC producers started discussing whether filming could continue. Friends and family whispered about how to save Amy from herself before the spiral dragged her too far under. It all came to a head in Tammy's living room, dimly lit and heavy with tension. The family gathered not as reality TV stars but as broken people desperate to save one of their own. Tammy sat silently in her recliner, oxygen humming in the background, her eyes red-rimmed with grief. Chris paced the floor like a caged lion, his frustration palpable. "Amy," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of years of love and disappointment. "We've been through too much together for this. You're a mother now. Gage and Glenn need you. Do you understand what's at stake? You can't throw it all away for this." Amy sat hunched on the couch, mascara streaking her face, her hands trembling. "It didn't seem like a big deal," she whispered. "I was just so lonely, so stressed. After the divorce, after all the pressure, I just sank. I didn't think it would get this far." Tammy's voice cut through the silence like steel wrapped in compassion. "Amy, you told me to keep fighting when I wanted to give up. Don't make me watch you give up now. If I can fight to breathe again, you can fight this." The words stung, but they also planted a seed. A professional counselor, called in by the family, finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Amy, this is a turning point. One day it won't just be an arrest. One day it could be worse. You have a choice right now: fight to recover, or keep going down this path and lose everything. Which will it be?" And then, as if fate had scripted the moment, little Gage toddled into the room, his small arms wrapping tightly around his mother's neck. He didn't understand the tension, didn't grasp the danger, but his hug said everything words couldn't. Amy broke, sobbing into his shoulder, whispering over and over, "I can't lose my babies. I'll do whatever it takes." The family embraced her, TLC cameras rolling silently in the background, capturing not entertainment but raw survival. That night, Amy agreed to check into a rehab program for mothers balancing recovery and parenting. It wasn't a fix, it wasn't a cure, but it was a beginning. Social media erupted with support. "Stay strong, Amy, we're rooting for you." The world, for once, wasn't mocking her, they were praying she could make it through. The days that followed, Amy's decision to enter rehab were some of the hardest the family had ever faced. On camera, TLC tried to show it as a hopeful turning point, a moment of redemption, but behind the curtain, the reality was far messier. Amy struggled with the program's rules, the strict schedules, and most of all, the aching absence of her children. Every morning, she woke up to silence instead of Gage's laughter or Glenn's cries. And that emptiness gnawed at her resolve. She wanted to be better, she wanted to heal, but the path wasn't smooth. There were nights she curled into herself on the narrow rehab bed, whispering, "I can't do this," over and over. Yet each time she reached that breaking point, she would pull out a picture of her boys and remember Tammy's words. If Tammy could fight for breath every day, if Chris could endure his own surgeries and still keep moving forward, then maybe, just maybe, she could claw her way out of the darkness too. Meanwhile, back home, Tammy was wrestling with her own storm. For the first time in years, she was standing on more stable ground, healthier, more mobile, and more in control of her life. But the cracks in her relationship with Amy haunted her. She replayed Brian's manipulative whispers in her mind, the way Amy had looked at her with doubt in her eyes, and it broke her heart all over again. Tammy had always been painted as the difficult one, the angry sister, the stubborn one, the one who pushed too hard. But now it was Amy, the sweet and bubbly younger sibling, who was faltering. Tammy found herself in the strange position of being the strong one, the anchor, and though she had prayed for years to become healthier and more independent, she had never imagined that strength would be tested by watching her sister nearly lose everything. Chris, too, carried the weight of the family's unraveling. He spent nights pacing his kitchen, replaying the intervention, asking himself if he had said enough, if he had been too harsh, if there was something more he could do. He loved Amy fiercely, but he also knew the brutal truth. Recovery was a battle Amy had to choose for herself. No one could drag her through it. The rest of the family tried to keep spirits high, tried to hold on to hope, but whispers of fear circulated. What if Amy relapsed? What if she lost custody of the kids? What if TLC decided to cut ties completely? Every what if was a dagger hovering above them. And each day that passed felt like walking a tightrope without a net, as if the pressure wasn't enough. The media circus made everything worse. Headlines didn't stop after Amy's arrest. They multiplied. Paparazzi snapped pictures of her walking into the rehab facility, and tabloids ran with it. From reality TV star to rock bottom, one magazine declared in bold letters. Online forums buzzed with cruel jokes, with strangers dissecting her downfall like vultures picking at a carcass. But there was also love. Thousands of comments pouring in from fans who had battled their own demons, who saw Amy not as a spectacle but as a mirror. Hang in there, Amy, you're not alone. I got sober for my kids, you can too. Those voices cut through the noise, giving Amy something the cameras couldn't capture, a sense of solidarity, of not being completely lost in the storm. And then there was Brian. While Amy was trying to rebuild herself, Brian's mask began to slip in ways that were impossible to ignore. At first, he showed up to court dates and family meetings, playing the part of the supportive husband, telling anyone who would listen that he just wanted Amy to get better. But in private, Tammy started to notice inconsistencies. He would ask probing questions about Amy's rehab insurance, about financial accounts, about what might happen if Amy couldn't finish the program. His concern felt less like love and more like calculation, as though he was trying to figure out what he stood to gain or lose. Tammy's instincts, sharpened by years of disappointment and betrayal, screamed that Brian's motives weren't pure. She began quietly watching him, waiting for the moment he would slip. That moment came sooner than anyone expected. One night, when Amy was allowed a supervised phone call, she dialed Tammy. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Brian came by earlier today. He told me maybe rehab wasn't worth it, that I should come home, that we could figure things out on our own. He said the kids need me more than this program does." Tammy's stomach churned. It was exactly what she feared. Brian wasn't encouraging Amy to heal, he was trying to sabotage her progress, to pull her back into his orbit of control. Tammy gritted her teeth and said firmly, "Amy, listen to me. He doesn't want you better. He wants you broken because broken people are easier to control. Don't let him win." Amy sobbed quietly, torn between the man she had trusted and the sister who had always stood by her. That phone call became a turning point. For the first time, Amy admitted out loud that she didn't fully trust Brian anymore. She couldn't bring herself to leave him, not yet, but a seed of doubt had been planted. And once that seed took root, it was only a matter of time before the truth grew too big to ignore. The drama escalated when TLC producers called an emergency meeting. With filming on hold, they were facing a difficult decision: cancel the show entirely or reshape it around the sisters' struggles in a way that balanced sensitivity with storytelling. Executives debated behind closed doors, while the cast waited in limbo. Finally, a compromise emerged. They would continue filming, but with stricter guidelines, more oversight, and a renewed focus on redemption rather than spectacle. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it meant the cameras would keep rolling. For the Slaton family, that was both a blessing and a curse. The show had given them financial stability, but it also meant their darkest battles would be broadcast for millions to judge. Tammy especially felt conflicted. She wanted the world to see Amy's recovery, to witness the strength they all carried, but she also hated the idea of strangers gawking at their pain. Still, she agreed to continue, because she believed that if Amy's story could save even one person from making the same mistakes, then maybe the humiliation was worth it. Amy's journey through rehab wasn't linear. There were victories, small ones, like making it through a week without cravings, or learning new coping skills to replace old habits. But there were also setbacks, days when she snapped at counselors, when she begged to be let out, when she accused everyone of not understanding. The hardest part wasn't the withdrawal, though it was the mirror. Rehab forced her to confront herself, to look at the patterns and traumas that had shaped her choices. She had to admit that some of her struggles weren't just about weight or fame or stress, they were about wounds that went deeper. Wounds she had buried under food, under laughter, under denial. Peeling back those layers hurt, but it also gave her a kind of clarity she had never felt before. She began writing letters to her sons, promising them she would fight every day to be the mother they deserved. She began journaling about Tammy, about the way their bond had been tested and torn. Slowly, Amy began to see that recovery wasn't just about stopping a behavior, it was about reclaiming the parts of herself she thought she had lost forever. Meanwhile, Tammy's suspicions about Brian only deepened. She started talking quietly with Chris and Amanda, piecing together patterns. Brian was always around when money was mentioned. He had quietly opened a new bank account Amy hadn't told anyone about. He had been seen late at night with people the family didn't recognize. The puzzle pieces fit too perfectly. Tammy felt a storm brewing, and she knew the day was coming when Amy would have to choose her husband or the family that had never abandoned her. The weight of that looming choice hung over every conversation, every gathering, every silent glance between siblings. No one wanted to push Amy to hard. Recovery was fragile, and pressure could break it, but they also knew that silence was dangerous. The climax came when Amy was finally allowed home for a supervised weekend visit. The family gathered, hopeful but nervous, watching closely as she reunited with her boys. The joy on her face was undeniable, pure, radiant, the kind of joy that only a mother could understand. For a moment, it seemed like everything might be okay. But then Brian arrived. He walked into the house with a smile too wide, a voice too smooth. He wrapped his arm around Amy possessively, his hand tightening just enough for Tammy to notice. "We're gonna be fine now," he said, kissing Amy's cheek in front of everyone. "No more rehab. She doesn't need it. I'll take care of her." The room froze. Tammy's heart pounded, her fists clenched. She wanted to scream, to drag her sister out of his grip. But she knew the choice had to be Amy's. Everyone's eyes turned to her, waiting, praying. Amy looked around the room, the faces of her family etched with fear, the wide eyes of her children, the smug grin of her husband. And for the first time, Amy didn't look broken. She looked determined. The moment Amy stood in that living room, surrounded by family, the air thick with tension, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Her children clung to her legs, their tiny hands reminding her what was truly at stake. Brian's grip on her shoulder tightened, his words dripping with false reassurance. "See, you don't need anyone else. We can do this our way." But Amy had heard enough of his our way. For months, his way had meant chaos, manipulation, and pain. Slowly, she pulled herself free from his arm. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew steadier with each word. "No, Brian, I do need them. I need my family. I need this program. And most of all, I need to be healthy for my boys. You don't get to tell me otherwise anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Brian's smile faltered, his charm slipping away, replaced by the raw anger he usually hid. For once, Amy wasn't shrinking under it. She was standing tall. Tammy and Chris exchanged a glance, tears threatening to spill. For years, they had carried Amy, defended her, fought for her. Now, she was fighting for herself. But Brian wasn't ready to let go, so his mask cracked completely that night when he exploded in front of the family, accusing Amy of betrayal, of letting fame and cameras brainwash her. His voice rose, his words sharper, his posture threatening. Producers, who had been quietly filming the reunion, immediately stepped in, and for the first time, Brian's true nature was caught on tape. No edits, no filters, no excuses. What had been whispers of suspicion now became undeniable evidence. The footage was raw, and when TLC executives reviewed it later, they knew they had a decision to make. To air it would expose the ugliest truths of Amy's marriage. But to hide it would mean lying to the audience that had followed their every heartbreak and triumph. The weight of that choice loomed, but one thing was certain. Brian's hold on Amy was crumbling. Brian's hold on Amy was crumbling. The days that followed were chaotic. Brian stormed out, vowing he'd take the kids, vowing he'd destroy everything Amy had built. His threats cut deep, reopening old wounds Amy had tried to seal. But this time, she wasn't alone. Tammy moved into Amy's house temporarily, not just as support but as protection. Chris stayed close too, refusing to let Amy face the storm without backup. The family lawyer quickly filed for temporary custody protections, citing Brian's outbursts and documented manipulation. The battle lines were drawn, and suddenly the drama of reality TV collided with the cold, unforgiving system of family court. Cameras captured the tears, the tense meetings, the late-night phone calls where Amy whispered her fears into Tammy's ear. But behind every breakdown, there was also strength. Every time Amy thought she couldn't handle one more blow, someone, whether it was Tammy, Chris, or even her fans online, reminded her she wasn't fighting alone. Courtroom days were brutal. Brian's legal team painted Amy as unstable, as unfit, as a mother who had chosen rehab over her children. They twisted her healing into a weakness, using every mistake she had ever made as ammunition. But Amy's lawyer, armed with evidence and testimony, fought back. Tammy testified, her voice cracking as she described Brian's manipulations. Chris took the stand too, recounting moments when Brian had tried to isolate Amy from her family. Even TLC producers submitted statements about what they had witnessed during filming. For once, the cameras that had often exploited their pain became a shield, capturing the truth in ways no one could deny. Each day in court felt like walking through fire, but Amy refused to burn. She sat, chin high, hands clenched, eyes never wavering from the judge. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and fans held signs that read "Justice for Amy" and "Protect the Kids." Tabloids spun every angle, some cruel, some sympathetic, but through it all, Amy stayed focused. She didn't care about headlines anymore. She cared about her boys, about their future, about proving that she was more than the mistakes she had made. And slowly, piece by piece, the tide began to turn. The judge, moved by testimony and evidence, granted Amy temporary full custody while the investigation into Brian continued. It wasn't the final victory, but it was a massive one. For the first time in months, Amy felt like she could breathe. The family celebrated quietly that night, gathered in Tammy's living room. No champagne, no fanfares, just relief. Amy hugged her boys tightly, tears soaking their hair, whispering promises she intended to keep. Tammy sat nearby, watching with pride. For years, she had been the one who needed saving. Now, she was watching her sister rise from the ashes, stronger than ever. Chris cracked a joke to lighten the mood. Amanda baked a cake even though no one was really hungry. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the Slaton house echoed with laughter instead of tears. It was fragile, yes, but it was also real. Meanwhile, TLC executives made their choice. They would air the footage, unfiltered. They believed that showing Amy's struggle, raw and unpolished, would not only honor her fight but also give voice to countless viewers facing their own silent battles. The season became unlike any before. Viewers weren't just watching a weight loss journey, they were watching survival, resilience, and the brutal reality of addiction, recovery, and toxic relationships. Ratings soared, but more importantly, the outpouring of support was overwhelming. Letters, messages, and videos poured in from fans around the world. Survivors of abuse, recovering addicts, single mothers, people who saw themselves in Amy's tears and Tammy's determination. The Slatons had gone from reality TV curiosities to symbols of perseverance, whether they wanted that responsibility or not. But even as the show's popularity peaked, Amy knew her work wasn't finished. Recovery wasn't a straight line, it was a lifetime of choices. Every day, she woke up and chose her boys, her health, her family. There were temptations, moments of doubt, nights when the weight of everything felt unbearable. But each time, she remembered how far she had come, how close she had come to losing everything, and she pushed forward. Tammy, too, continued her own journey. The sisters' bond, once fractured, was now stronger than ever. They bickered, they laughed, they leaned on each other in ways only siblings could. And though the scars of the past would never fully fade, they no longer defined them. Brian's shadow lingered for a while, resurfacing in appeals and angry outbursts, but his grip was gone. Amy had chosen herself, and in doing so, she had taken away his power. In the final courtroom showdown, when the judge granted Amy permanent custody and restricted Brian's access, it was more than a legal win, it was a declaration that the cycle of control and manipulation was broken. When Amy walked out of that courthouse holding her boys' hands, with Tammy and Chris flanking her sides, it wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a new story, one not written by scandal or addiction, but by resilience and hope. The cameras eventually wrapped, the season finale airing to record numbers. Viewers wept as they watched Amy reclaim her life, as they saw Tammy cheer her on, as they heard Chris remind them all that family means never giving up on each other. But what struck fans most wasn't the drama, it was the raw humanity. For once, reality TV had shown something real, a family scarred, broken, healing, and rising again, long after the credits rolled, long after the hashtags stopped trending. The story of the Slaton sisters lingered in the hearts of millions, because at its core, it wasn't just their story, it was everyone's story who had ever stumbled, ever fallen, ever doubted, and then somehow found the strength to stand again. And so, as Amy tucked her children into bed one quiet night, the cameras gone, the noise of the world silenced, she whispered to herself the words that had carried her through the darkest storm. I'm still here, I'm still fighting, and I'm not done yet.